start recording, and we are recording.
Excellent. So we are continuing mapping apologetics. We are also continuing with our classical apologist by the name of William Lane Craig. Last time we talked about the ontological argument in depth and other related issues. Now we're going to jump into William Lane Craig's argument on, the cosmological argument, which is one that he helped revive, although it goes ultimately back to Thomas Aquinas. And we're going to work with that. Did you want to, because you did have an outline, did you want to?
Sure. I guess we could start with, so at the bottom of 238 is where he kind of puts the argument in a list format, which is 1, whatever begins to exist has a cause. 2, the universe began to exist. 3, therefore the universe has a cause. And I think this was the chapter that I really liked because it talked about like cause and effect, and
Yeah.
it kind of brings it back and forth, like brings it back to the source, and eliminates some other arguments for like a universe that exists forever, or other issues with that,
Right.
which is cool. So
The simpler version of this is, and there's a flaw in it. I think the simpler version of this, because the word begins is really important.
Yeah.
Because if you take out begins, then you have a problem, right? So if you do whatever exists has a cause,
Right.
the universe exists, therefore the universe has a cause. That's all well and good, but then you have a problem with what the argument's pointing toward, which is pointing toward a God creator.
Yeah.
Well, then the God creator would fall into the category of things that exist, and then you're into this infinite regress.
Yeah.
Right? Because wait a minute. Well, the universe exists, it has a cause. God exists, it must have a cause, and then you just have all of these perpetual causes going back in time. So the begins is really crucial, right?
Yes.
Because obviously with the notion of theism, God, or the theistic God, that sounds so redundant, but within theism, the idea is that God is eternal,
right,
and therefore it does not have a cause. So by using begin, that helps, because God can't be put into the category of begins to exist. And then also, too, there's evidence that the universe did begin.
Right.
Big Bang cosmology.
Right? Yep. Yeah. So it skirts around the issue of saying anything that exists had a cause.
Correct.
And was there a counter to that?
There is a counter. On 239, there have been a number of attacks on the argument. Craig says that Daniel Dennett misstates the first premise as everything that exists. Oh, we just talked about that.
Yeah,
everything
we just talked about that one.
Must have a cause. Then he asks what caused God, but the premise says whatever begins to exist must have a cause. The theist claims that God is eternal and so does not need a cause.
Right.
Others look to experiments in quantum physics that seem to show events coming about uncaused at the subatomic level in a vacuum. So,
so it just breaks down our view of causality, essentially.
Correct. Right. And also challenges begins to exist has a cause. The question I have now, obviously, I'm totally outside of out of my depth here, is that how do you know it doesn't have a cause? So if there is a certain subatomic, and I guess maybe the vacuum is the key part because it's a closed system.
I mean, I would say that nothing is a closed system, and that I would say that it's impossible to say that it doesn't have a cause, because maybe there's something very far removed that's causing it. And like you can't create a closed system.
Yeah, if you're going to say that something doesn't have a cause, that means you have eliminated. I mean, that's huge. You've eliminated all possible cause or causal possibilities. Okay.
Yep.
Right. And that seems that almost seems incredible. Like literally, I can't believe it that
Yeah.
you've exhausted every other causal candidate, and you're like, "Yep, I've covered every one, every last one."
Hmm.
So, I mean, continuing to read, it says Craig notes that there are a number of interpretations of quantum physics, and there is disagreement about the experiments. Also, whatever's happening, no one is claiming that particles are coming into existence, but rather there are spontaneous fluctuations in energy.
Hmm.
And the vacuum is far from nothing, but is a sea, quote, a sea of fluctuating energy, endowed with a rich structure and subject to physical laws. So nothing is happening ex nihilo, or out of nothing, as it would have to in order to mimic the origin of the universe. So, I mean, so two things come to mind. One, I don't know these experiments well enough to be able to comment on them.
Yep.
So we do some research. And then I hold to my other point about exhausting every causal candidate.
Yep.
Um,
And there's some things that are just like, very linked together. Like, I mean, you can take it like an individual atom is in the environment of the surrounding atoms and molecules, which is in the environment of whatever proteins or things it's creating,
yeah,
in the environment of a cellular organism, of a human. You go out to like the human level in society and Earth, and all of those things have an effect on one another. It's hard to, you can try to narrow it down and be like, oh, well, this is causing that,
right.
but you have gravity, which is the
Yeah,
sun, which is so far away from the earth, and then
yeah,
that's
that's a good
causing
point.
things here. So,
No, that's actually true. In other words, what you're doing is it's almost it's. I mean, this might be a bad analogy, but almost like a butterfly effect. In other words, like what to what degree can you, even if I am doing a particular experiment and I think it's relatively closed. I
hmm,
mean, you have all these other aspects that you're not even that aren't even in the that aren't even to be included in what you're doing, but are having an effect.
yeah, hmm,
Right, you know what I'm saying?
yep,
Like even a lab, if it's absolutely sort of like a sterile environment, it doesn't matter. There's still the laws of nature affecting that particular lab, and probably a lot of other either superficial or non-superficial things that are going on in the lab that can affect a result.
yeah.
You
And
know,
like with quantum stuff, we know that we can link particles and send them across distances, and then they still affect one another. So it's like
yeah,
maybe there's something like that going on in these situations. So yeah, it's
yeah,
just like, how can you
yeah,
exhaust all the
yeah.
possibilities?
I feel like with I feel so yeah. So really, um, I mean, I think what's interesting here is that. Yeah, I'm sorry. Let me finish the full thought.
Mhm.
So you can challenge one and two. You can't challenge three because the three follows, right?
Yeah.
The universe has a cause. Um, it seems like two has a abundant amount of information of proof leaning toward it, right? And
Evidence.
also
Yeah. Hmm.
evidence, and also that would be universally accepted between theists and non-theists,
Hmm.
right? In terms of Big Bang cosmology.
Yeah.
Um, so that one, yeah, I just feel like the evidence is in on that one, you know.
Hmm.
I'm sorry, premise number two, that the universe did have a beginning.
Yeah.
I think what's interesting is that it, you're ending with the universe has a cause, and we all know what's going on indirectly, where it's pointing to.
Yeah.
But, but I guess I guess what I'm getting at is what would be the candidates for a cause
Mm-hmm.
that that would be beyond God or a
Yeah, I
creator.
mean, I was gonna wonder if you were gonna criticize the first point, which is whatever begins to exist has a cause. Is that like a tautology? Like, if something begins to exist, then I don't know. Uh, it almost I don't know. It's weird.
Like what you're saying, are you saying that that the notion of cause is already worked into begins to exist?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, kind of. Or
I mean,
yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's fine.
I see them as separate because there is we go back to the quantum physics possibility, um, or let's put it this way: you want to be thorough with your statements, and in so being like really careful with your statement, you can say, all right, something has begun to exist now. what brought that about?
Mhm.
Did anything bring that about?
Right.
Like, in other words, it's sort of, you might be thinking like, duh, if it began to exist, of course it had a cause. But philosophically speaking, it seems like there you have possibilities. There was no
Mhm.
cause, or there is a cause.
Mhm. Yeah, I guess.
So I don't know that cause is necessary. I mean, I think in sort of everyday common thinking, totally. If something began to exist, then everyone's going to be thinking cause, right?
Right. Yep.
But to, but if you're putting it in sort of the strictest terms, uh, uh, even without sort of everyday, or whatever, a thought experiment, you're like, hey, could could when something begins to exist, it is possible that it didn't have a cause, or it's possible that it did have a cause. Now, which of the two makes more sense?
Mhm. Or when something exists, it has the option of either beginning to exist or not beginning to exist, I guess.
Right,
So,
right,
yeah.
right.
Um,
Um,
which
see,
I guess is
the
a
other thing I was
metaphysical
go
fact that you kind of need to accept that something can not have a beginning,
uh, well, no, it seemed like that would be almost empirical.
that something would not have a
Well, oh, wait a
beginning.
minute, did not have it. No, I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
like
did
a
something.
god.
Oh, yeah, that would be much more, totally.
Yeah. There's no,
See, and
yeah.
that's, to be fair, if everything needs to be argued, right? And for the classical apologist, well, at least, yeah, everything does need to be argued. Even if you throw in, like Craig does, we mentioned this last week, a little bit of the work of the Holy Spirit, which is more
Mhm.
based on faith than reason. Um, then, I remember when I used to teach this stuff, I always wondered, like, why is God, or how do we prove the eternality of God?
Mhm.
Or is that an article of faith?
Mhm.
And also too, the other one too, that I was just like, my brain like never got around. I was like, why is God outside of time? Like, why is that necessitated?
Mm.
I know it's believed, but why is that necessary? And it seems like like I feel like those are articles of revelation. Or you could say something like, with this cosmological argument, you have to then be consistent that there had to be something there that itself was uncaused to bring about this universe.
Mhm.
So you're just extending the logic of the argument. So
Oh, I see. So
all
you're
of
saying that things that exist and have a beginning have a cause, and you follow that argument down to either everything has to have a cause, or there's some terminal state where there's something that doesn't have a cause and it kind of closes the
exactly,
loop. Okay,
exactly.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
that's it's the other way people talk about it is the God is the prime mover,
Mhm.
prime first, or God as the uncaused cause,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So that, like, what other candidate do you have to put there at the beginning of time, other than a being? Or it has to be a being, right? It has to be some type of intelligence, given the. I mean, now we're going to slip into the teleological argument, but it has to be some type of intelligence that would
Mhm.
bring that about. Oh my God, I'm low on battery. What?
Uh-oh. Yeah, I guess if
Might need to
you
move it.
that's okay. Um so I guess if you were to like try to take the point of view that the universe is a cyclical kind of thing where um it expands and then collapses, if that were possible, right?
I'm going to go there.
What? You were gonna
Yeah,
go there? Yeah. So like
I was going to go there.
if you were to take that framework where there's a cycle, um, would you have to say that that cycle had a beginning, or could like I don't know, like I don't know if that breaks down or not. Because one
I,
we're talking about there doesn't have to be an intelligent being, right? If you
mhm.
have a cycle
Yeah,
already
yeah,
in
yeah.
place. But if the
Right,
cycle's
right,
already
right,
in place, did it have to have a cause? Like, is that a necessary
right.
condition?
I feel like you're back onto an infinite regress, and an infinite regress is at some it's going to lead to almost like a reductio ad absurdum,
Hmm.
right? That it almost seems absurd or irrational that a process could go on back in time forever.
So would
In other words, it seems like there would have to be some point at which there was a start.
now
I gotta get a cord. I
okay,
gotta get a cord.
let's do that.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Nice chimney, though, huh?
Yeah, it is. Um,
Let me just give you a different view of the chimney.
mhm.
All right, let's just make sure it's on. Good.
So I guess the question is what's absurd the fact that it is cyclical? Because like obviously it makes sense that if you have an infinite regress of like whatever universe, or I mean whatever, you can follow it down to like a lineage of births of a person, right? There's going to be
Right,
some beginning, and then you have like a universe, and it has some god that creates it. But you could argue like, oh, well, what made that? So then there's some other god that creates that god, right? You can kind of
right,
take that regress, and that doesn't make sense
right.
because there needs to be a beginning. But if the beginning is the end, then like, is that the part that's absurd, or is
The
that
beginning is the end. Help me on that.
so like if you have a universe that collapses back to the Big Bang
Yeah, yeah,
state
yeah.
and then re-expands, then the beginning and the end state are the same. So it's not like the infinite regress isn't going back and
But,
back and back
but,
to other
but,
things, it's on itself.
but the question that I would have is that, like, so I understand the cycle, but there's still a linear component in the sense that there had to be a initial state.
Why?
Well, what was before the initial state?
Why does there need I don't know why does there need to be something before the initial state?
For it to come into being. Like in other words, it seems like you would like the way, and maybe I'm missing something. I mean, I understand cyclical in the
Mhm.
sense of sort of bang, big crunch, big bang, big crunch, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But my brain is stuck on what was there when the cycle started.
Why does the cycle need to start? Why did like God didn't need to start?
That's I can't get my brain around that. I
God
can't.
didn't need to start. Why couldn't it have always been that way?
But there would have to be something that was all right. Let's just all right, and this is part of like or some of the struggle that I'm having is the finitude of my own mind
Right.
and the temporality in which I exist, where I'm always thinking about things in terms of past, present, and future, right?
Mhm.
So it could be a limitation in my ability to grasp it. Okay. So is it possible that there is a big bang, big crunch that's been going on for eternity? Yes, it seems like that could be possible.
Sure.
Um, my given the temporal being that I am, my I'm unable to think about. I still come to a start notion. Like
Mhm.
there had to be some, even if it was something like matter just existed forever, and out of that you know what I'm saying? I don't know, but that doesn't even make sense because the notion of the Big Bang is everything's coming out of this massive explosion.
Yeah.
Well, singularity anyway.
Yeah.
I don't know. Let's say a little singularity hanging out in space for
But
or
why would it need to hang out in space for any time at all for it to expand, right? Um, like I don't like why do you need to like I feel like if you have a cycle, right? You've got your
yeah.
cycle. Why do you need to enter into that cycle? Why can't the cycle just be there?
Okay, but why can't I ask what happened at the start of the cycle? Do you
Uh,
know?
well,
Unless I mean, it's the
there doesn't have to be a start of a cycle. You can end like you can observe it from any point in time.
okay. So this might let's say that the cyclical notion of the Big Bang, Big Crunch cosmology
If it
is
works, yeah.
yeah, if it essentially means, or let's say it would work without a god. I don't know. I mean,
Like I don't understand the counter argument to that.
I don't understand but I don't even. I'm having trouble understanding it. because there's again going back to the initial state, like what happened first. And then I know you're going to say, yeah, but it's a cycle. There is no first. But what brought about the stuff? What
But
brought about
you're
what?
asking what caused the cycle. But if we're saying that the cycle didn't begin to exist, it just always has, then we're following, you know,
Oh,
right?
you're working with that premise.
Yeah. The cycle's always existed. The Big Bang started the universe, and then the Big Crunch began. Like, I don't know.
All right, is it fair to ask, was there an initial Big Bang?
I don't know if like
Yeah, because I think the only way to get around your argument is to be pressed on first on a first initial state, and
sure.
you're not allowing that, which
So
I'm
I
not
guess
sure.
maybe it breaks down if you say so the universe began to exist, therefore the universe had a cause. So if the universe began to exist, or what was the cause of the universe? And if you say the Big Bang was the cause of
Right,
the universe, um, what the Big Bang started, so it had a cause. And you could say the
right.
Big Crunch was the cause of the Big Bang, right?
For the resulting state, not, it wouldn't be a cause.
Well, it would crunch and then it would
Oh,
bang.
it would
I'm
be the
saying,
crunch of. I'm sorry, it would be the
yeah,
cause, yeah, of the next Big Bang.
yeah.
Right.
So I don't know. If you were to take that point of view, then you would basically be having a cause that goes around. That's the cycle. I don't know. Yeah, I don't see um
But you're
I don't see the
taking the
counter argument.
notion of cycle
Yeah.
as something that did not begin to exist. I still have problems with a first state. There had to be something that was first. Like, is it logical to say that you can have, um, let's just take the God notion, right?
Mhm.
With the bad cosmological argument, everything that exists has a cause. So, okay, great, God exists. What caused God? Another God. What caused that God? Another God. Like at some point, you're gonna say no. That this, or I think that's illogical. These causal relationships can't go back in time forever and not stop somewhere.
Right. So that
So
makes
that's my issue with
sense.
even the cyclical. I understand you're throwing cyclical into the. Oh, look! It betrays the begin to exist because it never began to exist.
Mhm.
But I'm stuck on the actual materiality of the universe,
Mhm.
where which is like where did all that stuff ultimately come from? Like it seems like there had to be like it either it always existed as matter and then out of that matter a cycle started.
What if it always existed as matter in the cycle? Like
Right, but it had to start at some point.
what had to start? I don't know.
The cycle had to start at some particular point.
I don't know if it did.
But then I feel like if the cycle, if you're going to say it didn't start, then I feel like that's analogous to the God on top of 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 the God.
Why isn't it not similar, more similar to the just the God existing with his thoughts forever, or or outside like
Hmm.
so like I don't know. The difference I see with the God on top of the God thing
Yeah,
is you're stacking up. But
right.
like if you were to say that this God caused this God, then you're closing this loop, and like I don't know. Like that's the difference. I feel like one is just keep on going up and up and up, but then this
It's a
closes the loop.
linear versus cyclical.
Yeah. Um.
I, yeah, but I know I get you. I have to think about it more
Yeah.
because I'm just going to repeat myself,
Yeah. So I wonder if
right? Because I
that's
don't have another thought
that's fair.
that's able to at least for my purposes to address it.
Hmm.
Um, and I know, I mean, I know that in certain other religions, so like the Judeo-Christian, Islamic religions are all very linear.
Yeah.
And I know that within, I believe it's Hinduism,
Hmm.
um, possibly Buddhism, but I think more Hinduism, there is this notion of it's cyclical
Yeah, and it
of
comes with
like everything is like
reincarnation too.
created and everything is destroyed and everything is created and everything is destroyed. Um, so I'd have to reason um, out. Um, I'm using, and I understand what you're saying because I'm using sort of a linear logic on a
Yeah.
cyclical system. So I'd have to think about how logic would work out within a cyclical system as it relates to cosmology.
Right. Hmm. Yeah. So I guess I don't know. That's just one question I have that kind of comes to this. That's
No,
not
that's a
really
good one.
explained. Yeah.
That's a good one. A very good one.
Um.
Look how he ends it. 242. Um, the cosmological argument thus gives us powerful grounds for believing in the existence of a beginningless, uncaused, timeless, spaceless, changeless, immaterial, enormously powerful, personal creator of the universe. Boom.
Mhm.
Actually, it's interesting.
Powerful
Go up.
grounds.
If you go up here just a little
What?
bit, he said, since we cannot say that the universe caused itself. By the way, that almost sounds like what you're saying. By the way,
Yeah.
this
Where is he saying this? Oh, I see. I see.
well, I'm not going to get to the cyclical. I don't want to get back on that. Since we cannot say the universe caused itself, that its cause must transcend it. That transcendent cause, this addresses something we talked about earlier. That transcendent cause must itself be uncaused, because as has been shown, there cannot be an infinite series of causes backward. It must also be, this is interesting, immaterial, transcend the space and time that it created, and be enormously powerful. And it must be a person. Um,
I wonder why it must be a person.
that is because if a cause is sufficient to produce an effect, then as soon as the cause is there, the effect is brought about. But if the cause was always there because it is timeless, then it isn't the universe. Why isn't the universe timeless as well?
Is the universe time? I don't know. Since we saw that it's not.
As soon as the cause is there, the effect is brought about.
Mhm.
But if the cause was always there because it is timeless, then why is the universe timeless as well? See, I'm not sure why it has to be immaterial. I guess it has to be immaterial because it is outside of space and time.
It
I
has to
sort of
be.
I mean, I guess I'm sort of understanding why it can be why it's outside of space and time, because it as the create there is no space and time until the universe is created, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
there is no space and time. So that being must have already been, if the argument holds, then that being must have it was existing in a timeless. Um, I don't even want to say space.
State.
Okay, thank you. In a
Mhm.
timeless state or a timeless spaceless state, and
Mhm.
then created. I
Mhm.
guess it can't be material because
It has to
that
be outside of the system. It's like something
yeah
here causes and then begins something here.
yeah.
So I.
And maybe also too, it's not stated, is it the case that everything that's material, at least from our experience, is caused?
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting
Something
because
about materiality that includes the notion of causation.
that's weird because it's like it must transcend it. What exactly does that mean? So it's like the in this case God
Yeah,
created the universe, right? So
yeah,
something outside of the universe created the universe.
yeah.
Caused the universe. But within the universe, there's tons of cause and effect that
Yes.
doesn't transcend it. Like it's all within the system.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um, so it almost seems like a different kind of cause and effect,
yeah.
right? But why is that necessary?
You're saying that the
Like
our
me
everyday
picking up a
cause and effect.
book
Yeah,
and causing the book to move. I'm
right,
not out
right,
like we're in the same system, you know?
right.
Like I didn't
I
form this
I
out of
think
thin
the
air. I'm
notion.
not beyond space and time for the
Right. I
book.
think the notion. Well, right. I think the notion of cause of God causing the universe to exist must include a very different idea of causation than our everyday cause and effect that we
Hmm.
see. That isn't to say that it isn't to say that it's so radically other that we can't even call it a cause.
Hmm.
Yeah. So who caused the universe? God did.
Right.
But what that means probably looks a lot different. Like someone, this being is responsible for bringing this universe about. But what that looks like is probably not exactly like boiling water or something, or tripping on a rock,
Right.
right? Or even creating a laptop. It's probably somewhat. I mean, this actually gets into a lot of God talk anyway, where there's a whole question about what can we say about God
Mm-hmm.
that's accurate and that doesn't lead us into anthropomorphizing him, right?
Yeah.
Him, right?
Yeah.
Like you with me? Like that's a whole other issue about. There's a whole camp that says you can actually say positive things about God, and there's another camp that says actually you can't. You can only say negative things about God. What God is not,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Sure.
So I would imagine that this causation is probably it still has the basic principle of cause and effect, but it's probably, do you know what I'm saying? I mean, this is a spirit being
Yeah.
that is bringing about a material world that is very complex. So I can't even imagine, if you will, like if there was a camera running,
Mm-hmm.
what it looked like.
Right.
And I think that's fair to say about a lot of God talk, because you're talking about a being that is radically other. You know, you and I are made in the image of God, but we are not God. So
Mm-hmm.
we have something that's similar to God, but we do, like, this being is very other
Mm-hmm.
than I'm sorry, from what we know through divine revelation and things like that, very other than the the creature. The creator is very other than the creature. Um, you with me? I mean, it's sort of like,
Yeah.
like if this God is infinite, if this God is omniscient, um, omnipotent, all these things, that's a radically other being that probably operates in a radically different way than we can imagine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. So I
But
guess, yeah, I
yeah,
guess the issue with the cyclical, or what I guess it's called the oscillating universe theory,
yeah,
is that it causes itself.
yeah.
And
See, that's what I was going to say when it says caused itself. I was going to jump onto the
yeah,
cyclical.
now, let's see.
I can talk.
Um, yeah, I don't, it's interesting because you have to define what it means for the universe to cause itself.
But
Uh,
that right there, no, but I mean, I mean, to me, that betrays logic.
why?
I cannot create myself. You can, it's not there yet to make itself.
Yeah, I don't know. We're still thinking very linearly. Like, I
But
don't,
then what's the logic of? Then there has to be. Um, okay, either I can use the same logic.
is it a paradox? Like, is it a paradox that it caused itself? Like, if
It,
time travel is a real thing, could you birth yourself? Like, or after a chain of of a grandfather effect, could you be the cause of yourself? Or like, is that purely a paradox, or is that something that could be real?
yeah.
And could it be real with
What
the
I was
universe?
going to say is, either logic works universally with your linear versus cyclical
Hmm.
model, right?
Yeah.
Or or there's a different logic that that needs to work within the cyclical uh, cosmology.
I mean,
You
maybe.
know that,
So,
and I don't even know if that's a thing.
yeah, if you take a
I'm
pure
getting interlocutors. Okay,
as it
guys,
is.
I'm filming right now.
Hello.
Okay, we're filming right now. Okay,
From what?
this.
A podcast?
Yes, you can say that. Can you let him in? Um, so
So,
are you with me? So in other words, like, my own thinking is that logic should be able to critique and analyze both systems.
yeah.
Okay? Um, and then, so that's one thing. And then the other element is, and by the way, the time travel one, that gets into like crazy
Right. But
like math steps that I
could
can't even
could you
fully.
approach it from a determinist if you I guess could you approach it from a deterministic point of view? If you believed that the universe was deterministic, and you have a given state and it produces another given state, right? Like my brain patterns cause me to do this thing, right? Et cetera, et
Right.
cetera. Could you say that the beginning state of the universe causes all of these transactions of states,
Sure.
and eventually the end state was the beginning state? And so, by that
But,
nature,
but
by
okay,
following deterministic
I,
logical
I,
points, right?
but what? But how? I don't even understand how the end point.
Oh,
You're gone.
whoops. Yep, my video
I don't.
just.
I don't even understand how the when you say that the end point is the first point. Like that makes no sense to me.
So I'm only saying that colloquially
Okay.
in that the beginning state is what we define as like the Big Bang, and the end state is the collapse. But you could theoretically pick any point in the cycle, and that could be the beginning or the end, because in the like basically you're looking at it at um a level of state transitions. So you can pick a state, and that state causes another one, and it's caused by another one,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And then you can just you follow the chain of states. I don't know why my camera's not coming back on. You can follow that chain of states in either direction, and you'll end up where you started. Like from a deterministic point of view, I feel like that makes sense logically, at least.
But what I don't understand is that when you point to any particular position, like you said, within this cycle, it doesn't make sense to me. Well, I'm sorry. It makes sense to me that a particular point could be a cause of the next point.
Hmm.
But I'm not sure, but I don't get it on the start. I like what caused the initial position. And if you say the end did, I can't
So
get my head.
is that the paradox? Is that like,
Yeah.
is that logically false or is it consistent?
I mean, I guess
Like, is it just
I'm,
circular
I'm
reasoning?
actually sort of imagining a circle.
Yeah.
And I understand within a circle, there is actually no point at which it starts.
Hmm.
Or it seems to betray the question of where did it start? It doesn't even make sense,
Yeah.
just a circle. Um, so let's say the circle represents reality or the universe.
Yeah.
Then within that notion, you are right in saying that there really is no beginning. If I say there's no beginning of a circle, and then let's say there is an argument for a cyclical cosmology, then you're right to say there is no starting point
Hmm. And that's logically
with a
consistent.
circle.
Yeah. Yeah.
That makes sense within a circle.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense within my brain and with I'm sorry, within my experience of time in this particular world.
Right, but that's
Now,
because
now
you're only looking at a tiny segment of that
I
circle.
understand.
Yeah.
I understand. I understand. And let's say I can extend my tiny little spot all the way back to the Big Bang. It's still tricky to get down.
Hmm.
I will argue that a circle has no beginning.
Yeah. So,
You know.
yeah.
Um, and and to be fair, our temporality, right? My brain is structured in such a way to remember a past, or what I call a past,
Hmm.
to experience a present moment, and then to anticipate a future.
Hmm.
The way in which my brain is structured is it's so linear
Yeah.
that if the cyclical notion is true, I cannot wrap my head around it
Sure. I think that
because
I think that's fair. I think it's possible to wrap your head around it to a degree. Um,
well, I wrap my head around the circle
yeah,
finally.
yeah. So like I guess the problem I see is the this notion says that we cannot say that the universe caused itself, right? It's I guess what's weird is if you look at it and if you were to believe the things that support a cyclical universe, right?
Yeah.
Then you cannot say that it caused itself. Like if you're just looking at it from like a deterministic cyclical point of view,
Yeah.
you're just saying that one state caused another state and one state caused another state. Like that's all you're defining, right? Like the universe is the cycle, and it's not like you're saying that the universe caused itself. It's like
But
you're saying the universe has
but
always been, but the states cause
yeah,
other
the,
states
the
within it.
universe is the cycle, but it's not only the cycle. The universe is also all of the space-time, matter, energy, etc. within the cycle, right?
Right.
And I think it's a fair question to ask. Where did all that stuff come from? Now you might
Yes.
say, so it's not the cycle itself
Yeah.
that it is cyclical.
Hmm.
I can sort of accept that.
Yeah.
I can't believe I'm saying this because at the beginning of this video I said I couldn't. So I can accept that. I think the tricky part is going to be where did all that stuff come from?
Right. But if it
Where,
was
where
always there and it's just mutated, then
well,
that.
the one way to get by this argument,
Mhm.
premise number one,
It didn't begin.
everything that begins to exist has a
It's
cause. So
always been there. If it's
if
always been there, just mutated, then
yeah,
then
like
it's
that's
never
what I was
begin.
thinking. Like if
Yeah.
matter had always just existed, now
Yep.
people are going to have problems with that. But let's just say if matter just always existed,
Hmm.
um,
I
then
mean,
I get how a cycle could form out of that. You know what I'm saying? It's sort of random. It's random matter that is going to collect in a particular way. I see. I think this is maybe where we start to get things like where you have to trip into like the or the teleological argument where it talks about like a fine-tuned universe with ridiculously precise laws,
yeah,
etc., which seems to show some type of intelligence behind it.
that's
Like,
fair.
I think you were right with your challenge, and we're doing what philosophers should do, right?
Hmm.
We're analyzing all the premises and we're challenging them, and that's great to do. But then I feel like the teleological argument might get to an intelligence that this one's not getting at.
Sure. So if you were to approach it first with the cosmological argument, you could probably find a logically consistent argument for a cyclical universe where the matter is not destroyed or created, right?
Yeah.
Which is actually a scientific belief,
Right.
um, and it has always existed in a cycle. But what you're saying is that other evidences would challenge whether or not that is the most believable.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, like it's funny. I remember I was talking to Luke on one of our most recent camping trips, and philosophy of religion stuff came up, and he doesn't believe, but in a God. But we were talking about it, and he was like, he actually argued that he's like, I will be honest, the extent to which seemingly everything in the universe is a law regulated seems to be one of the better arguments for the existence of a god.
mm,
Um, that I mean, he was even kicking around the notion of a black hole. He's like, so we don't exactly know what the insides of a black hole are, or what laws operate in the inside of a black hole, but we know at least like the event horizon. And he's like, but if we are ever able to get down there, even if the laws are totally wacky compared to the rest, our everyday sort of experience of the laws of nature, he's like, I bet you'll find it's regulated.
mm,
There's laws at work there.
sure.
So that, and coming from, I don't know, let's at least call him an agnostic. He's not watching these videos, right? So that's an interesting admission, and this might be the case where you have to. I mean, one, we might be missing something. So if we called William Lane Craig, he was like, but alas, your cyclical
Hmm.
notion, and he crushes it, and I'm like, oh, we weren't thinking about that. That's a
Hmm.
possibility.
Yeah, sure.
Um, and um, and you know what's funny about no, I was going to say something about the matter always existing, but if matter always did exist, then it would challenge the notion of the first premise.
Yeah.
Um, and then the question would be, why are you? Where's the empirical proof?
Hmm.
That,
Yeah.
you know, um, So, how we doing on time?
Good. We're 45 minutes in. We
Okay.
should probably move on to the next argument.
You have time?
Yeah, I got it. I can do
Okay.
another 15 minutes.
Okay. Do you want to do the moral argument?
I think that since I, haven't read this in a while, and that one has an outline, it might be easier.
You don't need to. Well, wait a minute. I need to be mindful of time because I got to take someone somewhere at 1
Okay.
o'clock.
Mhm.
Go. Enjoy. You're fine. Moral argument, or do you want to jump into Geisler?
So I think
I
it
have a
might be.
feeling if we don't do Geisler now, we will not do Geisler, and that's okay.
I think that's okay too.
Okay, good.
I think the moral argument is more laid out, and Geisler was complicated in that he looked at a lot of different views for testing
Hey,
truth.
listen, I don't think he liked Catholics, so from what I saw online, so we can skip him. No, I'm joking. That's rational.
So, anyways,
Moral argument?
yeah, moral
Okay.
argument.
Moral argument, 251. So, premise number one, if God does not exist, then objective moral values and duties do not exist. Premise number two, objective moral values and duties do exist. I'm laughing. Three, therefore God exists. I'm not laughing at the argument. I'm laughing at that we're going to get onto an objectivity discussion.
Oh,
which
yeah.
we did a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. God does not exist, and objective moral and values duties do not exist. Yeah, why couldn't subjective moral values and duties exist?
So,
Yeah.
if God does not exist,
Is that
then
necessarily true?
if God does not exist, then objective moral values and duties do not exist. So let's work with that one.
Yeah. Is that necessarily
before
true?
we get to number two? Okay. Well, the question would be, what would make a value objective? At least you have a foundation.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest argument for God in this, or the strongest appeal of this argument for God for God as being a ground for values and duties.
Right. Yeah, and like, what definition of God would be necessary for objective moral and values to exist, like duties to exist? Like, could it just be a notion of, like, a common notion of, like, right or wrong, like, more of moral duty and value that just exists? Like, does there necessarily need to be the other aspects of God for this statement to be true?
So the notion of God that would be necessary here would be something like a lawgiver, right?
Yeah.
Somewhat like this would be a God that is a moral God, and perfect in its morality, and also has obligations for its creature. We talked about this a little bit before when we talked about the creator creature. You take you have the creator there. The creator imbues the creature with meaning, just like I, as a creator, when I create something, I imbue it with some type of meaning.
Right.
Um, and probably even abstract art even follows into that, or absurdist poetry, where there's still, even if it ends up being sort of meaningless, there's still some intentionality there, and that intentionality.
Right.
So, so I think when you do if it is the case that I am a created being by this creator, I well, see, I was gonna no, I feel like there are some there are some things that the creator has in mind for me, right? I mean, I could imagine you could have a God that's like, hey, I'm going to create, go have fun. You got about 70 some years, do what you want.
Sure.
But if we're dealing with a morally perfect being, and I'm got to throw in a little bit of divine revelation here that God has, that God wants to have a relationship with you and has certain moral directives accordingly, then I should do that. So I can understand how there could be a God that is giving objective morality. I will say, if there is no God, then if there is no God and if there is objective morality, where does the objectivity of that morality come from?
Right. like, could it be a biological thing? Well, I guess then would it not be objective? That's like that's a weird question. Like what makes morality objective? Um, is it that every human can sense it, but then can every human sense it? Like,
Well, what would make it what would make it object? So what would make it objective is that anything that's ultimately objective is not going to be just simply a matter of my own personal opinion and viewpoint,
right.
right?
But how can you
So,
define that?
so So that well, I mean, an analog would be something like I don't know, let's say Newton's laws of motion,
Okay.
or any type of basic set of scientific laws that we all agree are true, regardless of whether or not we were here to see them,
Okay.
right?
Hmm.
So that would be so those the objectivity of those would be ultimately proven through well, scientific method,
Yeah.
repeatability, and universality. I see it. I see it. I see things falling to the earth all over the earth wherever I am. Right.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that would be through ultimately that would be empiric through an empirical lens. But for morality, no. I mean, it can't.
Yeah.
You would not be able to do it empirically because the only thing you would find empirically is that um, it would be like sociological research would be the only thing you could find empirically. This population has this set of cultural mores. This population has this set. They do this in this country, but that would be the only description you could walk away with.
Right. And it's not like you can find a commonality between all of those and determine that to be objective.
Other than that, that humans are by and large morally oriented
What
because
does
there
that
are
mean? No.
no
Yeah.
that's so shallow, I
Yeah.
admit, but you would at least be able to draw the fact that we have all of these different moral systems at play, that we are at least concerned about morality, or if you want to be really reductionistic, law, and maybe you can ultimately reduce it down to survival or something like
Law
that.
survival. Yeah.
That would be the only thing that I think you could say about morality through the empirical lens.
There might be an emotional aspect too.
Sure,
Like
sure.
connection, community, like that
Hmm.
could be the drive to preserving humanity, and therefore
Yeah,
you don't want, like, don't kill other people because
right.
it ruins society or an individual. Um,
Totally. But
yeah.
so if you try to prove objective morality, I feel like you're outside of the empirical lens. I think you're somewhere else. And we talked about Kant in the past, and he does have his own sorry, his own rational, and I mean rational versus empirical. Okay,
Hmm.
so
Yeah.
reason his reason alone approach to arriving at objective morality, which is his little test to every action has a particular or has an assumed maxim.
Hmm.
So um, it is whatever. I lie to somebody, and the assumed maxim is it is okay for me to lie in this situation. And then what I try to do is I try to universalize the
Right.
maxim.
Hmm.
Can imagine everyone lying to everyone else, and if that hits up against a contradiction, then I just do the reverse work and say, okay, that must be immoral.
Hmm. Right.
Uh, and then you could do that with charity and so on and so forth. So that at least would be, even if we have problems with a Kantian approach, it would at least be a non-empirical approach to arriving at an objective law. But I even think that Kant has to get God into the equation at some point to
Hmm.
back that law. Um,
Yeah.
where it's even if I've discovered it, why would a godless universe, or how could a godless universe contain objective morality? I understand how it could contain objective laws.
Hmm. Yeah.
I'm sorry, laws of nature,
Yeah.
but what? Like, I don't know. Like, is there a way to think that out? Why a godless universe would have objective morality that people should abide by?
Hmm.
I mean, even you could do Plato and the forms. but even Plato in the forms, like you start to feel like the highest form, which is the form of the good, ends up sounding almost like God or a mind,
Hmm.
almost. Um, you know.
I don't know. Something seems like if you approach it from the bottom up, like
Hmm.
you're taking moral values and duties as the small items, and you're trying to say what is an objective version. I feel
Yeah.
like you can't really go that direction.
Yeah.
Um, and so when you get to something like objective moral, like morals and duties, you can't. I don't know if you can prove it from things within our world. Um, like
I
I
mean,
don't know.
it's
There's something
yeah.
about morality that's just a very human concept.
Yeah. Yeah.
That it's like it's not easily definable. It's not like
Yeah.
easy to generalize. It's
Yeah.
very situational.
Yeah.
It's very ingrained in humans and maybe
Yeah.
not even all humans. So it's like
Yeah.
it's not consistent either.
Yeah.
So if you do take the assumption that a God exists and that he there was an intended purpose and instilled moral duties and values at an objective level, then that makes sense that he's kind of backing those. But if
Yeah.
you if you try to approach it without that, I feel like you don't end up with moral objective morals, and
I don't
it's
think so. Yeah,
yeah,
I think you're right. I think
I,
what you would find. So let's just play that out: godless universe, Darwinian evolution. Then you have to end up. You have to end up. Well, the Darwinian.
and like a Machiavellian approach to morals too, or like
Sure,
where
sure. Yeah, it's that it
you
all
need
ends
a
up.
contract to keep
Yeah,
things safe between
yeah.
people. The world is chaos.
Totally,
Yeah,
totally. And then also and with the Darwinian model, then it all ends up becoming a matter of survival. All of it is survival.
right.
So it's a matter. And because I was going to bring up things like guilt. Guilt's a very interesting one, right?
Yeah.
And other related psychological states.
Hmm.
Um, and from a theistic point of view, guilt would point toward a moral an objective moral code that you broke, you
Hmm.
know, violated. But within a Darwinian model, it would ultimately be I am feeling shame because the group that I am a part of has created these customs, as it were, and I have violated them within the group,
Hmm.
and now I'm being shamed,
Hmm.
and that can become internalized even when no one's around, right?
Right.
So, but but that wouldn't be objective, right? That might be common, because that might be the only
Yeah.
objectivity would be it's common among all these brains
Yeah.
that are structured in the same way.
So I guess with that, I would agree with state premise number one. If God does not exist, then objective morals and values and
I agree.
duties do not exist. I don't know if I could agree with number two though. Like, how do you prove that they do exist?
Yeah. So number two, objective moral values and duties do exist.
How do you prove that? Like,
Yeah, that's oh, interesting. That's funny. On the next page, it actually brings up Darwinism.
hmm,
Um, it's a tricky one, man. I mean, um, I think probably certain ways would be, I mean, I recently came across really interesting dismissal of relativism,
hmm,
and relativism comes to mind here because of moral relativism. Okay,
right, hmm,
and the it was like one of those like very quick cut downs of relativism, and that is that it's making an absolute statement,
hmm,
because what it's saying is even though everything is that's it, everything is relative.
hmm,
That's the absolute statement. So it itself is making an absolute statement. The system, the very truth of relativism, is the absolute statement. That seems to betray relativism. Do you
right.
understand?
But
it's
yeah,
it's the snake eating its own tail.
that makes sense if you apply that generally. It doesn't make sense if you say that like morals. are relative, or like, that doesn't
No,
apply
no,
if you're talking
I'm
about laws of the universe too,
no,
right?
no, I'm with you.
Yeah.
So my point is the I think the way you end up getting like you could start to attack other you could start to attack um, other moral systems, subjectivist,
Mm-hmm.
relativist systems, and show the weakness of them. And then what are you left with?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's a possibility. I mean, we might not like that.
Sure.
It'd be nicer to have just a like a face-on argument for it. Um, the other one might be that I mean, it's tricky though because you could still come up with the Darwinist and other interpretations, maybe. But I would say one of the other ones that really kills relativism and even moral relativism is looking at particular cases where everyone of rational mind would agree that it is evil.
Mm-hmm.
And Hitler and the Holocaust is a good example.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I mean, how many people with a reasoning with like being very honest and very rational. So we're not talking about the outliers. We're not talking about people that are either trying to be silly or have various you know mental handicaps or whatever. Would look at that situation in Nazi Germany in the 1940s and say, well, it's just relative, or you look at it as immoral. I look at it as moral,
Right.
or it's amoral. I mean, I so do you look at, and then I feel like with those extreme cases, or even like the flip side of genuine charity and philanthropy, what makes those good. Now I know there are humanist explanations for it. You know what I'm saying? Like a utilitarian one, it generates pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
Hitler, it decreased or it generated pain. Um, so and those would be notable challenges. You know,
Mm-hmm.
um, well, that doesn't really help because that even utilitarianism is a type of objectivity. I can objectively say, based on pain and pleasure, that these are um, moral or immoral.
Mm.
They're not saying it's relative. That you know, I don't know,
Right.
but within that system, you don't need God.
Yeah.
You within utilitarianism, you don't need a God at
You just
all.
have to pick a utility function.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I agree with you. I think that number two is tricky.
Yeah.
I really think it is hard. I think sort of the common sense everyday person it, that holds to objective morality. I maybe thinks they understand why they do, um, but I think it's a very murky
It's not
area.
easy to rationalize.
No,
Yeah.
no. And also, whenever you think of one, so the Hitler and the Holocaust example, to be fair, you can also think of possible counters.
Yeah.
Not that it's moral
Right.
what he did, but why we might think it is immoral. I'm sorry, why we might think it is immoral from a different standpoint, other than a God that's creating objective morality.
Right.
Um, so two, I think is tricky, and I'd have to hear William Lane Craig on it
Mm-hmm.
to like why, and unfortunately there wasn't a lot of follow up in this book
Yeah.
on it. It looked like it was
Kind of
responding to
just
attacks
ended
on it.
there too. Yeah.
So it leaves more to discuss and more to
Ponder.
more to ponder, more to think about.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
So awesome, good.
Yeah. That was Lane Craig. I will end the recording right now.